Is Giannis about to be traded? Are the 12-0 Cavs a real title threat? Are the New Orleans Pelicans actually cursed? And LeBron had a dream that we have to talk about. That and more in today's episode of NBA News. Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Buckets. If you're over on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Helps the video do better, so it's much appreciated. And if you want to enjoy this show as an audio-only experience, check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. For our first story, we are talking about some Giannis trade rumors. Giannis has obviously been at the forefront of a lot of NBA discourse, specifically trade discourse, because of how awful the Milwaukee Bucks have been. They are 2-8, and a lot of people have been rightfully ringing the alarm bells. Now, I don't think we're at a point where we actually have to hit the panic button, but they have definitely left a lot of room to be desired. Not only are Dame and Giannis not really playing all that well together as a duo, but it is becoming increasingly clear just how poor this supporting cast is, particularly Bobby Portis, who a lot of Milwaukee Bucks fans have been turning against. As a result, there are naturally trade rumors for their best player. There have been trade rumors for Giannis for a long time now, pretty much ever since, I don't know, I feel like we've been hearing them since 2020 at the bare minimum, but this feels real. This feels more real than anything we have seen from them before, and if the Bucks continue to be this bad, it would not necessarily surprise me if Giannis was on the move by the trade deadline, though I would personally predict more likely than not if this were to happen, it would go down in the offseason. With that said, let's get a take from Bill Simmons as it relates to the Brooklyn Nets trade rumors, which is a team that has been at the forefront of this discussion.
I think the Giannis trade stuff is really going to start. People making up fake trades. And the Nets are like pretty good. I think they can just go all in for Giannis. They have just a shitload of picks. They have Cam Thomas, who I was really impressed by, who's a very good scorer. Cam Johnson, they have Nick Claxton, they have Schroeder's playing really well. I like them. I actually think they're a playing team at least. Because people are going to ask this week, who's the team that makes sense for Giannis? They're going to be like, what about Miami? What about... I actually think it's Brooklyn. They can just overwhelm Milwaukee with all these picks. Like they just can say, hey, Milwaukee, here's Ben Simmons' expiring contract, and here are all these picks. Just take all of them. Take as many as you want. Give us Giannis and put Giannis in Brooklyn. I think it makes sense because I think Milwaukee needs to get out of this. And to me, it's either Brooklyn or Houston because Houston's the other team that they have picks and young players. It's just like if I'm Giannis, would I rather go to Brooklyn or Houston? I don't know.
I actually initially was a little bit hesitant to agree to the idea of a Brooklyn trade because I was actually under the impression they had less draft capital than they do, because as I had remembered it, the Mikal Bridges trade was kind of making up for some of the draft capital they had lost from the James Harden deal specifically in the past. But turns out they have quite a few draft picks that are not just their own, and they do have their own for pretty much the foreseeable future as well, besides for the year of 2027, where they at least have 2 future picks, both for the Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers, and they have a good amount of picks that look like they could be pretty good with some teams that have some rather uncertain futures and some players who maybe are keeping them as a contending team right now, but might not be doing that 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So they actually have a good amount of draft capital, and you got to give them that. And I do agree with Bill Simmons that the Brooklyn Nets have been surprisingly good. However, I don't really understand why they're at the forefront of this conversation when there is the team Houston that he previously mentioned, but also OKC, which I think just makes for far better trade partners. Not only do they have just as good of draft capital, but I also think they have better young players to offer to less consequence. Really, the only majorly important young player on the Brooklyn Nets right now is, of course, Cam Thomas. That guy is probably someone you theoretically want to keep if you are trading for Giannis, so you have to take that bullet, and you're going to lose him, and you're not really going to have much else to build on. Meanwhile, the OKC Thunder and the Houston Rockets have a ton of young players, and they could trade a couple of them and still have a good amount of young players on top of that remaining after the fact. With Brooklyn, you have to consider what happens after the trade. Not just can this team make this trade, but does it make sense for them to make their trade given what they can do going forward in the future? Now, first things first, with Dennis Schroeder, who right now is making a most improved player case, I don't think he continues to play this well if Giannis is on this team, because a big part of the reason he is making that case is because of an increased role, a role that he will not have playing alongside Giannis. Then you factor in Cam Thomas, and when you consider how poorly Dame and Giannis have have looked together this year, why exactly would we think that Cam Thomas would look any better? He's a worse playmaker. He's a worse pick and roll ball handler. He is always looking for his own shot, and that archetype of player isn't even that good in my opinion. But even if you were a big believer in Cam Thomas, I don't think you can believe that he's just going to be like by far and away better than Damian Lillard has been next to Giannis. Cam Johnson is a great fit next to him. I think that's a flawless one, so I have no issue there. A shooter is always going to work next to Giannis. But then you get to Nicholas Claxton, who plays the 5, and he's not really a good option next to Giannis either, even if they would make for a pretty good and versatile pair of bigs for protecting the rim, switching on the perimeter and all that. I do think Brooklyn could ultimately be a decent defense and a respectable offense in this equation, but that's also if you're keeping all of these guys. More likely than not, you would have to put Cam Thomas in the deal, because if we're dealing with Brooklyn could theoretically put anyone from Jalen Green to Amen Thompson to Reed Shepherd, Jabari Smith Jr. There's a couple of young players they can throw in to sweeten the pot. For OKC, they have guys like Aaron Wiggins on the lower end, but of course, I think it is very reasonable that you could get J-Dub out of this equation. Obviously, they have draft capital to go on, but most teams, especially when they're trading somebody as big as Giannis, you are going to want to get somebody young who's pretty damn good to at least keep your franchise, your team's fans invested. Now, I got into a little bit of crap recently because I said that I don't think that OKC has to give up Chet, because that has been one of the bigger rumors. I think that Chet is a high enough level potential of player that I personally would not be willing to give him up in this deal, because I think you can make the deal without it. I have been operating on essentially the basis that Giannis is a OKC Thunder if they want him. If OKC wants Giannis, Giannis is going to be on that team, because they can offer the best young player in the deal out of everybody, because I think J-Dub is ultimately the best young player that anyone can offer, that at least is going to be offering, and they have more draft capital than anybody. So as of right now, I think we need to turn our lens more to OKC and focus less on the Nets, and I would also put more investment in the idea of Giannis going to Houston before Brooklyn. But I also want to turn this conversation to the Brooklyn Nets, because I don't think that making this move for Giannis is necessarily the move, even if you could make it work theoretically, because we have seen Brooklyn play this game time and time again. They did it with the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade. They did it with the James Harden trade after signing Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They have been playing this, we're going to give up all of our assets for a superstar move over and over again, and as a result, we have seen them fall on their face, and that is essentially the legacy of the Brooklyn Nets right now, is a franchise that makes short-sighted moves that fall on their face, and then they're left in disarray. And the fact that they have managed to find themselves in such a good position after all these years with both of the last two failed super teams, I think they should take that in stride and say, hey, we're going to change our approach to building teams going forward. We're going to build this organically. We're going to use the draft picks we acquired to, crazy idea, draft players and develop them and, get that to happen organically. Now, I understand that can sometimes come off more like a positive affirmation type shit than the reality of actually winning in the NBA, but the track record that this franchise has of this stuff blowing up in their face, I just don't think it's worth trying because of that. There is no reason to believe that this Brooklyn Nets team will be that much better than the Bucks are with Giannis. Frankly, there is a chance that they could sign somebody interesting in free agency. I believe with the way their salaries work, other than the space that Giannis would be taking up, they can probably get a max slot available. But if you look at the players who are available in next year's free agency, I don't think many of them are super acquirable. LeBron James is probably not going to team up with Giannis in Brooklyn. I don't think Jimmy Butler will, because I don't think these two like each other. Not to mention, I don't think that would be a good duo on the floor. Fred VanVleet's option is probably going to be declined, but he's not a star player. Kyrie Irving, I don't think he's going to go back to Brooklyn to play with Giannis. James Harden, I don't see ever playing with Giannis, and again, that's not some great second option. Brandon Ingram, don't like that. Maybe Chris Middleton returns to Giannis, but that's not going to get you anywhere. Julius Randle would be an awful fit. And then now we're getting into the role player territory. Miles Turner would be a cool fit, but, just getting the perfect center next to Giannis is not going to solve all of your issues. You still got plenty more to worry about. So I really don't think they're going to be able to build some great roster around him. And I would rather just see the Nets do their own thing for a little bit without concerning themselves with involving themselves in the careers of a bunch of superstars who continue to fuck them over and over again. So yeah, I think OKC makes more sense for Giannis. That said, we are nowhere near the point where I think this is, right around the corner. I would say we can check back into this conversation 20, 30 games down the line as we get towards the trade deadline. More often than not, generally a player of Giannis's caliber is not going to be moved at the deadline, rather in the offseason, and that's what I would anticipate here. Greg Popovich, we actually missed this, so I feel very bad about that, but unfortunately he has suffered some sort of undisclosed medical episode last Saturday that was about 2.5 hours prior to the Spurs' home game against Minnesota. The Spurs' acting head coach Mitch Johnson says that Popovich was not feeling well, but would not elaborate on what happened hours earlier. Obviously, we're hoping that he's doing well. He's an older man, obviously. I have said before that I'm pretty sure Greg Popovich is just going to die coaching. Don't want to see that happen, but there's a non-zero chance that this does end up being a huge problem for San Antonio in the future, and I'm worried about what that fallout will end up looking like. But yeah, I'm not a prayer person, but he's in my thoughts. The Cavs are 12-0. They are the 7th team in NBA history to start 12-0. Kenny Atkinson is a very strong contender for Coach of the Year right now, although I do think there are a handful of strong contenders, especially the other one that I would shout out is Mike Budenholzer over in Phoenix, because I think he has made a world of difference for that team. Evan Mobley having a breakout season has helped, although I will say his numbers have kind of dialed back a little bit recently. Not that I'm too concerned about it. It is just, he's not quite as good as he was in the first 5 or so games. But a lot of this, I do want to say, you can chalk up to some hot shooting a little bit. You can chalk up to not having played a bunch of particularly difficult opponents yet. They beat the shit out of Golden State, so that is some evidence that they could potentially be able to handle some of those topper tier teams. But a lot of people have been comparing this team to the 2015 Atlanta Hawks, which I think is pretty much just going to be the metric for what we call just about any team, and seemingly especially an Eastern Conference team that is good, but not, seemingly legitimate to people. I think a lot of this stems from the idea of needing a superstar to win. That was a lot of the thing that was the knock against the Atlanta Hawks, because it's like, yeah, this is a great starting lineup, but is this a good enough NBA team when your top guy is not one of the top guys? Donovan Mitchell, though, I think very much has an argument for being that guy. However, simultaneously, they have been good despite the fact that he hasn't been like electric by any means. I'm not knocking how he's been performing, but it's not like he's backpacking them. It's not like he has some super strong MVP case. No, Darius Garland has been way better than he was last year, which was a turnaround that a lot of us were anticipating, but I think he's hit it even harder than many of us anticipated. Evan Mobley's growth has been awesome. They have a lot of players who are hitting their threes right now. Isaac Okoro is like 50% from 3. Karis LeVert has been awesome off of the bench. And the other guy I really want to highlight with them is Ty Jerome. That guy looked like he was barely an NBA player, but thus far for Cleveland this year, he has been phenomenal. Yeah, he is shooting 54% from 3 on 2 attempts per game, 61% from the field overall, 64% on 2-pointers, 10 points and 3.5 assists in just 16.5 minutes of action. So Cleveland is running, 2 guards primarily at the point, and that is Mitchell and Darius Garland, because Mitchell's getting a good amount of point guard minutes. However, after that, we are seeing Karis LeVert and Ty Jerome come off of the bench, and they are a phenomenal pair of guards who are shooting the ball well. Sam Merrill has been a really prominent three-point shooter for them, not some super high percentage. Isaac Okoro, as I mentioned, at 48% from outside. Darius Garland at 46%. So I do think a little bit of this is some hot shooting that will chill itself out a little bit. Like, I don't think that Cleveland is going to win 70 games. Sorry to rain on that parade. I don't think they're quite in that territory, but I also don't think this 2015 Atlanta Hawks thing is a fair thing because I think Donovan Mitchell is a level of player that he is, while not quite 2015, while not quite like a bona fide, without a doubt, top 5 player in the league, is someone who can border on that top 10 conversation. And for that reason, I think that it's enough when you factor in the rest of the team being really good. And I think in the modern NBA, the way I feel about it personally, I do not believe that the superstar impact, the importance of a superstar is as significant as it was because the bottom half of the NBA rosters has gotten so much better. Like the 8th man in 1999 is, I don't know why I chose that year, the 1990s. An 8th man in the 1990s is so much worse than the 8th man in a modern NBA team. I actually don't feel like the best player on a modern NBA team is that much better than the best player on a 90s team, but the bottom end of the totem pole in the NBA has increasingly gotten better to the point where I think it reduces the impact of the guy on top because the superstar isn't so far above every player on the floor anymore to the degree that they used to be. So I don't really subscribe to the superstar thing as something that's essential. I mean, you can look at the Bucks right now. They have a fucking superstar. How's that going? Good roster construction, good depth, and then a great culture is what's really important in the modern NBA. And this team has it. And I got to say, as someone who has been Kenny Atkinson pilled for years, like pretty much ever since 2019, I mean, that's the year that you would become a Kenny Atkinson fan, with the Brooklyn Nets making the playoffs despite the fact that they haven't had draft picks for the last like 4 years. That era to me encapsulated that Kenny Atkinson could be an excellent head coach. So seeing him doing as well as he is right out of the gate the moment he gets a head coaching job again in the NBA, it's pretty vindicating. I've been basically saying Kenny Atkinson is my #1 coaching hire suggestion for the last like 5 years. So this is very vindicating. Shout out to him. Shout out to the Cavaliers. It's a well-coached, deep team. And while Donovan Mitchell would not be my first choice to be the best player on my team, I don't think he is far enough from being a superstar that it takes them out of the contender conversation. I would firmly categorize them as that. Norman Powell is the most improved player. There's no other conversation to be had about it. We actually talked about this very briefly on the shoot around in the abridged version that just came out. Check that out if you have not already. It's primarily a rookie and sophomore report, but we kind of just cut the podcast down just to be a smaller, quicker experience for y'all. But Norman Powell somehow managed to avoid the most improved player conversation. He is winning this award unless this is just truly a next level hot streak. Now, don't get me wrong, he's shooting 50% from 3. That's not going to maintain itself because no one's done that, at least not at the volume that he is shooting the ball. However, I do think the possibility of him maintaining being a 24, 25 point per game scorer is very real, especially considering that the Clippers are good. They're at least a reasonably consistent NBA team with a system that will consistently get him these looks. And Norman Powell has always been someone who's been able to put the ball in the basket. I really liked him in Toronto. I thought it was silly when he got traded by them. And now, I mean, I never thought he'd be this good, but seeing him actually get this opportunity has been dope because I do think he is a level of scorer that seeing him unleash like this has been really fun. I've been specifically thinking a lot about the 3 dribbles or less scorer. You know, a guy who does a lot of catch and shoot, a lot of backdoor, or if they do end up dribbling, they're not going to be dribbling the air out of the ball. They're going to make a move quick. Norman Powell has been doing it a lot this year. He's probably the most prolific at it. Another example would be Grady Dick. Devin Vassell on his first game back with the Spurs perfectly encapsulated what this looked like. I believe only 2 of his buckets included beyond 3 dribbles. Norman Powell's dope, by far and away the most improved player so far, so shout out to him. I'm doing a way too early NBA award predictions video here probably this week. Spoiler alert, this is my MIP. Aaron Gordon going to be out with a calf strain, which is huge given that depth has been a problem for them. However, turns out that the Denver Nuggets have mostly been fine. Peyton Watson has stepped up in lieu of this injury, and he's been really good, specifically on the defensive end of the floor, but he's also been hitting his three-pointers. Christian Brown has stepped up in that shooting guard spot and looked really, really good. His three-point volume is still not as high as I would like it to be, but he's hitting them when he's taking them, and he is one of, if not right now, the best player at attacking closeouts in the NBA. So I actually think Denver's going to be fine. I was going to make the same I'm worried about the Nuggets video that a lot of different NBA YouTubers made. I didn't make it because of scheduling issues. Like, I just fucked up. And that video did not end up coming out. But thank God, because it would have looked short-sighted. I definitely was panicked, but I was not, quite at the panic button, especially because you gotta resist the urge to be reactionary to the start of the season, because believe me, the urge does exist there. But I think they're gonna be fine, and the fact that they have looked okay without Aaron Gordon is a pretty great sign for their depth going forward. Hopefully that is not just fool's gold, and once again, Peyton Watson is hitting the side of the backboard in the playoffs, but I think there is a reason to be hopeful if you're a Denver Nuggets fan. Some more rapid-fire injury news. Asar Thompson cleared to return to play after 8 months out with blood clots. That is awesome, because we were a little worried that he might not even be able to pursue his NBA career from here. Kawhi Leonard is still out and listed out until at least December 1st, but it seems to be fairly indefinite. Ja Morant, week to week after being undercut mid-air. I can't remember the name of the player that did it, but it seemed like a fairly dirty play, and it was shocking that there was no foul call on that. Chet Holmgren got a brutal, the highlight of it is awful. I don't know if highlight's the right word. The clip of it is awful, because I could feel that in my hip bone when he landed on that. But he landed on his hip very, very hard, and he's going to be out for 8 to 10 weeks minimum. OKC is probably a little bit panicked by that. Luckily, Isaiah Hartenstein's timeline has him coming back soon, because otherwise they don't have a center, like literally at all. Not to mention, they don't even have a forward that can really play center. I believe the tallest guy they have on their team right now that is rotation worthy, that isn't hurt, is like 6'7" Aaron Wiggins. I'm pretty sure that's the tallest dude they got who deserves to be in an NBA rotation. And all of their fives, including their fourth best center, are injured. So hopefully OKC will be fine. Hartenstein coming around the corner should help that, but Chet being out this early is obviously a big bummer. Kevin Durant going to miss 2 weeks. The MVP is pretty heavily favored towards Jokic right now, but honestly, if I were to say anybody is in second place, it's him or Jason Tatum, and I'm saying that as Kevin Durant's biggest hater, of course. Something I've really enjoyed about how he's played this year is he's back to putting pressure on the rim. He's had a rim frequency much higher this year than he's had in the past couple of seasons. There's always been a part of me that was like, I get that a lot of that comes from injury, and I'm giving him somewhat of a pass on that front. However, I always felt like he could do it a little bit more even still, and that's been proof of that. More credit to Mike Budenholzer, but also credit to Kevin Durant, who has historically shown a little bit of stubbornness to the idea of playing within a system, but he has played within this Mike Budenholzer system and played within it flawlessly. Pelicans have 6 of their best players out, including Zion, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray. Trey Murphy is luckily returning soon. I think I just saw that Jose Alvarado got hurt. Jordan Hawkins, who has been a breakout player for them in the void of all these other scorers, he was averaging like 17. He got hurt. And they keep going further and down the bench, and we keep seeing random dudes getting a shitload of buckets as a result of it. First of it was Jordan Hawkins. It's looking like Brandon Boston Jr. might actually be a real NBA player. Some rookies have been heating up lately. If you want to hear some further rookie conversation, again, go check out the latest episode of the Shoot Around, the abridged version on this channel and the extended version over on the Shoot Around channel. Jalen Wells, steal of the draft. I wonder who insisted on this being in the video. It couldn't be the Memphis Grizzlies fan who inserts them into every conversation. To be fair, Jalen Wells has actually been pretty fucking awesome. He's also a really young player. Dude's just an absolute bucket. I saw this really fun play from him the other day where he caught I don't know if it was an offensive rebound or something, but he found himself like on the baseline near the basket. He did a pass fake into a baseline fadeaway that looked like I was watching Kobe. That shit was gorgeous. He's third Sorry, Zach Edey right now is third among... Is this just a fucking Grizzlies report, Rudy? Zach Edey and Jalen Wells, the most important rookies. Who gives a shit about anybody else? Zachary Reese-Shea had a 33-point game, putting him at number 1 in rookie points per game at 12. That's really just a matter of most opportunity because, frankly, I don't think he's a better scorer than Jalen Wells or Zach Edey. He just plays starter minutes. Good on those guys, especially Zachary having that big game because he struggled with his shot in the NBA thus far. I am going to talk about MVP stuff more a little bit in the future here. This MVP ladder is a little bit old. I think Nikola Jokic would probably be at the top of it at this point because that's where a majority of people have been moving the conversation. But as of 4 days ago, AD, Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic, and SGA make up the top 4. And then I don't really worry about the top 4 or anyone beyond the top 4 unless someone jumps into that top 4. So I'm not really... Especially, Tyrese Maxey's not winning MVP this year. I hate to break it to you. Last, let's talk about LeBron tweeting his dream. LeBron is a really funny man. Often I don't know how intentional it is. In this case, I don't know, he's just like a 40-year-old child. Just woke up from having a dream. I was playing for Duke for Coach K inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. It was insane in there. Told Coach K it was an honor to suit up for him, and he said the same back to me. He's such a legend. Then it turned right into a concert. Snoop and Dre were performing and they were doing the song The Next Episode. The roof inside Cameron damn near came off. Haha. Then my alarm went off and I woke up. Shocked emoji, smiling emoji. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to add to this. It's just funny. There you go. LeBron tweeted that. If you didn't know, it's great. I have nothing to say. Anyways, shout out to Nick for editing this video and goodbye.